Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Texas lawmakers want to limit how much cities and counties can spend. Here in Austin, the mayor says it could hurt the city's efforts to house the homeless and hamper large projects like expanding the convention center. KXAN's political reporter Phil Prazen looks at the push behind Governor Abbott's call to put a cap on local spending.
When tax bills hit, many might have one or two programs they'd rather not pay for. For James Quintero at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, it's the $9,000 for an artist in residence at the city's watershed department.
Here in Austin, we have a problem with too many wants and not focusing enough on our needs.
He supports Senate Bill 18, which caps how much city councils and county commissioners can spend.
Be able to demonstrate on a national stage what small, responsible government looks like and how that can absolutely ignite an economy.
A closer look at Austin over the past decade shows the budget growth fluctuates from 0 to 15%. SB 18 would cap at population and inflation growth, which historically has meant around 4% a year.
It certainly seems to me that a lot of the state leadership wishes they were mayor.
Austin Mayor Adler wants to dedicate future property taxes to projects like expanding the convention center and revamping Waller Creek. And this cap could get in the way.
It would have a huge impact on the city's ability to be able to do those special projects and special things that the community wants and expects.
He points the finger back at lawmakers who drive up Austin property taxes by not paying more for public schools. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
Senator Craig Estes from Wichita Falls authored the bill. He tells KXAN the details are a work in progress. In the days ahead, they'll discuss exempting law enforcement budgets and setting the cap at a county-by-county level instead of a single statewide cap. Spending is just one issue where state lawmakers are targeting local control. Last week, the Texas Senate approved a bill to put new limits on cities' ability to annex land. Senators also passed a measure to cut back local rules to protect trees on private property. And the Texas Senate approved a bill to roll back some local rules that ban drivers from using mobile devices behind the wheel. The bill would supersede existing ordinances in more than 40 Texas cities that go beyond state regulations. Concern about the state taking away local control led several mayors to sign a letter requesting to meet with Governor Abbott. Wes Rappaport talked with 3 West Texas mayors after their visit about what they said to the governor and how he responded.
Very well, actually. Yeah.
That's Lubbock Mayor Dan Pope moments after meeting with Governor Greg Abbott.
We're here to talk about issues that impact our citizens, our neighborhoods, our small businesses, the people we represent.
Pope, one of 17 Texas mayors who signed a letter to the governor requesting a meeting. Their letter outlined concerns with Abbott's special session call, reminding the governor about the needs of their communities.
I signed that letter along with the other mayors to make sure we had a voice, that we could talk with the governor about some of his issues that he's directing the legislature to enact and what their impact might be on a community such as El Paso.
The mayors of El Paso, Lubbock, and Amarillo say they focused on specific issues like revenue and spending caps and annexation with the governor. Amarillo Mayor Ginger Nelson says neighbors know best when it comes to making decisions that impact her city and others like it.
We'll be looking for every opportunity to reinforce the idea that we value fiscal responsibility, as we have one of the lowest city tax rates in the state, and that we value that because we are locally deciding that for ourselves. So I'm glad that we've had the opportunity up until now to trust our local citizens to make those decisions for themselves.
I was very encouraged by the conversation. We had some good give and take on some conceptual items related to some of his issues, and I'm very pleased with the reception.
We're all focused on what we can do to support those citizens. I thought it was a valuable time.
Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
One of the mayors who met with Governor Abbott was John Tomates of San Marcos. This is his first year as mayor, but he spent 14 years on the city council. Tomates says both the San Marcos and Texas constitutions promote local control and that control is important for a growing city like San Marcos.
We definitely got the governor's perspective on issues like annexation, short-term rentals, rollback rates, and we made sure that he got our position as well and that he understood the unique circumstances, for instance, when it comes to flooding in San Marcos, and when it comes to dealing with the budget year in and year out. In San Marcos, we always have more needs than money.
Mayor Tomates says his goals aren't partisan. He only wants to serve the citizens that elected him. By the way, the mayors from Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas all signed the letter as well. The governor has not arranged to meet with them. The Senate quickly passed bills aimed at rolling back local control, but there was some opposition. Up next, we'll hear from Austin State Senator about the battles still to come under the dome. And later, some lawmakers start the process to restore budget cuts that took therapy services away from many Texas children. But see why the governor has to decide whether to let their bill advance. Joining us now is State Senator Kirk Watson from Austin. You guys have had quite a week.
It's been a busy week.
Yeah, it seems like the legislation is flying through.
Well, yeah, and for no good reason, really. First of all, we could have had what we really need to do on a special session and been done in about 2 or 3 days, the sunset bill, and then been gone. But because there's a lot of politics being played and a lot of things were put on the call, what we should have been doing with those things, if we're serious about those and if they're that important, we should have not had to rush those through committee. We should not have been suspending notice rules that are important like what was happening in the Senate. We should have had in committee the ability for people to amend these pieces of legislation and do committee substitutes before they came to the floor, so that what we would have avoided on the floor is this need to amend these bills and try to fix bad problems with the bills. We're passing some pretty badly worded legislation just in the name of speed and being able to have bragging rights about how fast things are moving.
One of the pieces of legislation that you brought most concern with on the floor was the bathroom bill.
Right.
Talk to me about that one.
Well, first of all, I think the bathroom bill, as I said on the floor, is outside the call. The bill, the way things work in a special session, as you know, is the governor has to set a proclamation that has what you can bring up. You can't bring up a bill, and you can't bring up a subject of a bill that is outside what the governor prescribes. And in this instance, this bill not only dealt with bathrooms and locker rooms and changing rooms and things of that nature, it also deals with athletics and whether boys can play in girls' sports and that kind of thing. So it's clearly outside the call. But the lieutenant governor overruled that point of order after some length of time because they're hell-bent to pass this. Plus, it is the bill that came to the Senate floor that passed out, it was introduced in committee, came out of committee, and showed up on the Senate floor, expressly said that local communities could not protect a class of people from discrimination. It is, as I said on the Senate floor, that is staggering that in 2017 there's legislation passing out of a Senate committee and has to be fixed on the floor that says you can't protect people against discrimination in the state of Texas. So it boggles my mind that we're dealing with that. Now, that the words about discrimination got pulled out of that bill on the Senate floor. But we now know clearly the intent. It was stated right there in that bill. And all the folks and all the businesses that are telling us that they see this as a discriminatory bill, and the Lieutenant Governor and others are saying, no, we don't mean any discrimination. Well, all you have to do is read the bill. They did take that language out, so we still know their intent, but the effect is still the same. So it is a bill that is, it's shocking how far it goes, I think, in doing damage to our state.
And I know there were police chiefs that were even involved in the
that's you raise a really good point. We're seeing more and more in the legislature and in the Texas Senate for sure. We're seeing more and more where there's this effort to create fear against a vulnerable group. The Sanctuary Cities bill is an example of that, where the public safety was what was spouted as the reason you need to do this, but yet our public safety professionals are saying that's not going to keep us any safer. In fact, it will make us less safe. And then you have this so-called bathroom bill, where, again, the public safety officials are saying, you know, we're not seeing this as a problem. There's just not a problem that you're going to be solving with this. And in fact, many people are worried it's going to create more problems. But what's happening in the Senate is you're seeing an effort to create fear to justify attacking a vulnerable population. And I think part of it is just so that they can vanquish that population and those people and that ought to have our protections and be able to tell their base that they've done something.
We've got about a minute left. I want to, talk a little bit about what's happening on the other side of the Capitol. Yeah. Clearly, there's been a lot of focus on what the Senate's been doing in the last week and a half. How do you think the House is going to receive what's coming from the Senate?
Well, first of all, I think that the House is being more deliberative and good for them and good on them for doing that. And I think what they'll do is they will look at some of this legislation that's been so quickly and badly rushed out of the Senate, and they'll take their time. What I'm also seeing them do is focus on some issues like school finance that are issues that we ought to be, if you're going to bring us back for 30 days, we ought to be looking in more detail on school finance. And then even on bills that like the teacher pay raise, that I ended up voting for after some changes were made to it. I offered an amendment to make sure that the commitment to teachers was one we were going to keep. I offered that amendment on the Senate floor. It didn't make it because I worry about whether teachers have a right to trust the legislature when it says we're going to keep a commitment. But what you're seeing on the House is they're doing those things in different ways, and in some ways I think are better.
Well, do you think you'll be there the full 30 days?
Well, I'd be surprised if we're not, but just because there's still, if we're going to focus on all the bills that are on the call, it's going to take a while. And I don't know, somebody would have to adjourn it sine die, and I'm not seeing anybody really saying they're going to do that right now.
Well, hunker down, right?
That's exactly right. I'm in for the long haul, and I'm happy to, I really am, I'm frustrated by the fact that we're dealing with things that are just a waste of time and taxpayer dollars, but if I'm there, I'm ready to fight them.
Senator, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
When Texas lawmakers cut the amount the state pays to therapy providers for low-income and disabled children, many young patients lost those services. For one state representative, the debate hits close to home.
So you come to this job wearing lots of hats, and you can't get away from the daddy hat, ever.
Now some lawmakers have started the process to restore budget cuts, but see why it's going to be up to the governor to decide whether to let their bill advance. Texas lawmakers cut the amount the state pays to therapy providers for low-income and disabled children. Those cuts led some therapy providers to drop patients. Now some lawmakers have started the process to restore budget cuts. But as Phil Prazen shows us, it's going to be up to the governor to decide whether to let their bill advance.
Hi. 10-year-old Braden Brown was born with dysphagia. His mouth muscles don't allow him to speak or swallow. He also suffers from epileptic seizures.
That's why he is the center of our universe, because the days begin and end with his health.
Texas tax dollars help pay for his in-home nursing and therapy. 2 years ago, lawmakers thought Texas was being overcharged for this type of therapy, so they reduced the rates to state paid.
$135 to $53 that's a lot. And again, it's not taking into account car. It's not taking into account life.
During the regular session, budget writers restored a quarter of those rate cuts. But since they're back for a special session, Representative Sarah Davis wants to tap the state's rainy day fund to restore 100% of them.
If the governor is going to bring us back here to talk about which bathrooms people can use or what we can do with our trees, then surely the disabled children of the state should take priority.
The Senate's lead negotiator on the issue, Georgetown Senator Charles Schwartner, didn't return a request for comment. Neither has Governor Abbott, who has the power to put it on the special session call, or not. If he doesn't, it can't pass. For now, the House is going at it alone, as families watch on. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
The House Appropriations Committee held the hearing for the bill to restore funding. Round Rock Representative Larry Gonzalez is on that committee. For him, the debate hits close to home.
And so, my child has been diagnosed with autism, and it has been a learning experience every day for 15 years for us. But what you learn is the therapy works. And what you learn is you see my son take from the therapy, and you see him begin to make connections. You see him begin to do things that he wasn't capable of doing before. And so as a legislator and as a daddy, you can sit back and say, hey, that worked. And then to wear this hat and watch this body cut those funds is frustrating for me, because as a daddy, I know it works.
Since the cuts began, therapy providers have bailed from the state program. Hill Country MHDD is the latest to end its contract with the state's early intervention program. The Texas Health and Human Services Commission says that group will stop serving 375 patients in Blanco, Comal, Gillespie, Hayes, Llano, and Mason counties beginning in October. The spokeswoman for HHSC tells KXAN they know this is an incredibly important program for families, and they're working to find replacement contractors to make sure children get the services they need. While House members consider legislation outside the governor's call, measures passed quickly by the Senate are waiting for hearings. What does that mean for the future of those bills in the special session? We'll put the question to our roundtable next on State of Texas. The state Senate worked through last weekend and had some late night sessions to quickly pass Governor Abbott's special session priorities. It's a different scene in the House, though. So what does that mean moving forward? For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. Alana Rocha is the multimedia reporter for the Texas Tribune. Mike Ward is the Austin Bureau Chief for the Houston Chronicle. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about everything that's coming out of the Senate going over to the House. How is the House receiving that, Mike?
Probably generally not well. The House slowly, much more slowly than the Senate, and they're going to have a deliberative discussion on the House. I think you'll see fewer bills end up passing the House than did the Senate. The Senate passed 19 bills in 7 days, which they said is some kind of land speed record, but the House has got a much different take on most of these issues than the Senate does.
And when it comes to local control, we've, obviously that's been a highlight of the past session and now the special session, but do you think that the House is going to have a different take on that specifically? Because it's maybe not one of the issues that we think about that bring a lot of emotion, like the abortion insurance issue that's come up or the bathroom bill.
But you do hear a lot of emotion from local city leaders and, mayors. We might get to that as far as Abbott sitting down with the mayors. But, it's a big issue, and we've seen, already the tree bills that have gotten so much attention that the House did pass a version, and it's the same version that the governor vetoed during the regular session. So it doesn't look like they might play ball on all those issues quite like the Senate did.
You've been seeing these emails that the governor's office has been sending out this week about the list of all the supporters for his priorities. What do you make of that?
He's just pushing his agenda here, and he's trying to show strength in the number of people who are supporting these. And the interesting parts of those messages and the press releases that are coming out today listing all the House members that are supporting all these measures are the names that aren't on there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think, this was something he promised, threatened, whatever, however you see it, prior to session, and he's following through, thinking that this public political pressure will entice some of these members to get on board, but it remains to be seen, especially with everything coming over to the House at once.
He needs a naughty list then, right? He needs to come out with the people that aren't supporting it.
Right. Well, he said he was going to have a naughty list, but he hasn't had one so far.
Yeah.
My guess is, as we get closer to the end of the session, we may have a naughty list.
Be a shift there.
Right. So one of the emotional issues that I talked about earlier was the abortion issue with how it relates to insurance from your company provider. How did that play out, really? I know it was kind of a heated moment for a while on the Senate floor.
On the Senate, I think, again, it's hard to see as far as a lot of the members, questioning the need for this and the fact, a lot of Democrats especially rose up to talk about the circumstances where, it's not necessarily elective or, if a woman is raped, that's not an elective, pregnancy, if you will. And so it was a hard debate, but again, the Republicans had the numbers to pass it.
Yeah, the Democrats really don't have a chance when it comes to the numbers.
Not in the Senate, but when you get to the House, you've got more moderate Republicans who vote a lot of times with the Democrats, and so you can get a number there with that block that can prevent some of the legislation from going through, or it can modify some of the legislation that comes out of the Senate. And if you'll notice, most of the bills that have come through the House so far are different, much different than the bills that came through the Senate. So you're going to have a conference committee at the end to try and get a resolution to get the same bill. And that could tie stuff up as well.
Well, we saw that at the end of the session, right? I mean, you know, there were certain issues where there were different versions passing out, and the Senate was uncompromising, saying, you know, we're not even going to appoint a conference committee, for instance, if school finance doesn't include a school choice measure. So.
When you have the two chambers so divided like that, do you feel like that this could have implications for the next session after the next election cycle? I mean, a lot of people have talked about, will Joe Strauss be the speaker next time? But I mean, could it shift something liberal conservative in either house?
No indication now that Joe Strauss is not going to be the speaker. There's been discussion about that. No indication that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is not going to be the lieutenant governor. No indication at all that Governor Abbott's not going to be the governor. This special session is as much about the March 2018 primary as it is the special session, because a lot of these are base Republican issues that the Republicans, the real conservative Republicans, are going to use to run in that primary. So yes, it's going to have an effect when the legislature comes back into session for its regular session in 2019. It's going to have residual effects on the folks who are here voting on this and that.
And we're going to see where Texans are. I mean, because a lot of the vote in the House, especially with Republicans, is walking a line, especially with the bathroom bill. You know, are you a social conservative? Are you a business conservative? Who are you with on those different issues? And I think that's what we're going to see play out, especially in the primaries, because they can say, I voted this way and I'm with so-and-so.
Let's get done with the special session first, though, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.